Hello, and welcome to our September conversation of women and blended families. My name is Gayla Grace, and I serve on the Family Life Blended team where our ministry is all about serving blended families. And today, the focus of our conversation is on managing busy households and overwhelmed emotions. And we're also going to talk about having an hours baby. If you haven't joined us before, we are live the second Tuesday of every month on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube on the Family Life Blended page. We have a different guest each month with a different topic, and we have moved our time to 12 p.m. Central. If you're watching us live, you know that you're on here. And that is the time frame that we're going to stay at. Of course, we'll still do the recorded version also. But before we get started, I would love to know who is with me live. I always enjoy having ladies who join me live. So tell me where you're joining from. And I'm also curious, those of you who might have an hours child, or maybe you're considering having one. Yes, no, maybe you think you're too old to have one. Well, maybe you don't want to tell me that, but no judgment one way or the other. I'm just curious if you have an hours child. Throw that up. Yes or no, thinking about it. What's the situation with that? And as we wait for our ladies to join, be sure to tag a friend who you know would benefit from the conversation. Even if they can't join us now, they can always watch the recorded version later. And remember, put your questions in the comments related to our topic today at any time. We love to answer your questions. Now, I want to introduce our guest. I am excited to have Heidi Farrell joining me. Heidi is a stepmom of 2 young adults, and she is the mom of 3 children. She and her husband, Tim, have been married 14 years. She loves to connect with and encourage women, which is exactly what we're doing today. She is the founder of notjustastepmom.com, and she has an ebook on adding an hours baby on her website and other great resources. So check that out. But hello, Heidi, and welcome.
Hello, Gayla. So good to see you.
Yes, it's great to see you. I'm thankful to have you on. Now, I have to tell you, we've got some on here who have responded with Hours Child. So, one from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania has 3 hours kids. There is someone from New York that has 2 hours kids. So, we've got some on here who have
Yeah.
experience with that subject. And I'm interested to see who else might tune in on that. Well, I want Heidi to dive right into the subject today because we have a lot to talk about. As the mom of 5 kids, I'm curious, do you struggle with feeling overwhelmed at times?
Yes, Gayla, I certainly do. Would I be human if I didn't? No, I do think that that's a normal human response to a lot of things in our lives going on. And I do think that, overwhelm it might be perceived as a negative thing, but I think sometimes it tells us something about our life. It tells us something about our mindset or our marriage or how we're parenting. And I think sometimes those are good clues to kind of tap into.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the reality is blended family life, I mean, it's messy
Mhm.
and it has unexpected happenings and it has busy schedules. I'm curious what you find to be the most overwhelming for you, whether it's today or in the past. What do you find as a mom and a stepmom to really that kind of ends up overwhelming you?
Yeah. So right now our situation is that my 2 stepkids are 26 and 23, and our 26-year-old's my stepdaughter is married and they live in Nashville, and my 23-year-old stepson is working out after college in Denver, and we live in Nebraska. So we don't have, for a long time I was a full-time stepmom, and I had the high school girl, the middle school boy, and then the 3 younger ones. I felt like we had every stage of child development in our house, like
Yeah.
crying babies with diapers, toddler temper tantrums, there was, and then like teenage drama. So there was always some excitement in our home. These
Right.
days, it's a little different. We function a little differently, but we just added a foreign exchange student, a 15-year, or she just turned 16-year-old girl from France. So now we have a little bit of that back in the home. But so now with my kids are 13, 11, and 8. So we definitely function differently now than we did
Mhm.
when we had my stepkids full time. But I mean, there's overwhelm in every season. So I can remember back to when, we had all the things that drama practice after school, like band practice before school. We had sports, we had, preschool pickup, all the things. And sometimes it can feel very overwhelming when there's just one of you and a lot of people to manage.
Right.
So I do remember feeling like, man, sometimes it's just so much. And again, I still feel that nowadays. It's just back in those times. And I can remember one specific story that I'll just briefly share that kind of summarizes how I think my life kind of looked all the time. But this particular instance it was after school. It was a Friday night. My stepdaughter was she was gonna be going to her theater practice. My stepson had like a band concert, and then we had the little ones. And everybody's running around like just trying to get where they need to go. Everybody's, where's this? Where's that? Where's my band pants? Where's this? And so my stepson was looking for his black pants that he had to wear for his concert. And my stepdaughter said, "Oh, I think they're out in my car." She was driving at that point. "I think you left them in my car." Well, she went out to go get them and came back in. And then for some other reason, she went back out and she screams and she says, "I smashed the cat under the garage door." He wasn't dead. Don't worry. The garage door had the cat was trying to run in. Anyway,
Right.
the cat's lying there, tongue hanging out. She's screaming. My stepson is like, what do I do? Because we were like, we have to go to the vet. We have to take this cat to the vet. So he was wearing just like his boxers and his dress shirt, looking for his band pants. So he grabs the first pair of pants he can find, which are my husband's snow pants. It's like May, but grabs these snow pants. I'm like, grab the baby, grab the top, all the kids. Like we're in the car with this cat wrapped in a towel, still the tongue hanging out. Like we're all children are screaming. Catherine, my stepdaughter, is like, "I'm going to be late to my practice." And we get to the vet and we walk in, the circus of us, like random, emotions going on. And we hand the cat over the desk and they're going to, where they're going to take it back and check to see if he's going to be okay. And they come back out a few minutes later. They go, "Well, it looks like he's going to be okay, but we could do an x-ray to make sure there's no spinal damage." And I said, "He's going to be okay?" "Yeah, I think." "Okay, we're fine. Thank you so much." We took the cat and we left. And it was like just this whirlwind. And we walked in with a kid in snow pants and a dress shirt. Like this was just the epitome of how I felt like my life was so often, was just managing, putting out fires. And so, yeah, in all of that, I do believe that God can bring peace and calm in our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we have some centering in Jesus, that all the circus, all the drama, all the chaos, it almost just becomes kind of funny after a while.
Yeah, I think that when we look back on it, we can always see some humor in it. But in the moment, I think that to kind of keep ourselves calm, sometimes it's helpful even to say things to ourselves. Or, do you have any techniques in the moment that as you're knowing that you've got all this going on, what do you do to just keep from losing it? Because it's not going to help if us, as the mom or stepmom, just, totally goes off. And
Yeah.
so somehow we have to maintain our composure. And there's been times that I will, even under my breath, "Stay calm, Gayla, stay calm." I'll just start
Yeah.
saying things to myself to try to help keep myself centered.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. Just that calming kind of like reassuring yourself. June Hunt has a phrase that I love. It's "now is not forever." And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes I just have to repeat that. Now is not forever. This moment will not be forever. And part of that too is just kind of asking God, like, are my thoughts aligned with scripture?
Right.
What am I trying to bring in perfection here? Am I trying to have total control over the situation? Is that why I'm getting overwhelmed? Am I trying to have everybody obey, everybody, and in blended families, Gayla, I mean, it's kind of impossible to have
Uh,
control when there's another household you're dealing with. Maybe
right.
the bio mom has said, this kid is going to be in all these sports and you need to get them there, and you don't have a lot of control. So
Right.
it's kind of centering and going, "Okay, God, what am I in control of? I can't control these outward circumstances, but I can control my response and how
Right.
I react to that."
Right. Absolutely. And I think you really said something that for the viewers to hear, that there are so many things that we cannot have control of. And so we have to just accept that. So if we
Mhm.
carry an attitude of acceptance for these things, then it keeps us from just bumping up against a wall that we can't move, things that we can't change. And
Yeah.
when we accept that and then we consider, well, what can I change? What are things that I can address, then that can
Mhm.
help with some of those feelings of being overwhelmed. And I don't know about you, but I think for me also to talk to my spouse, and
Mhm.
I am one who can tend to keep things bottled up when really I need to be talking about it because
Mm.
just that helps us process. And if we keep feelings just bottled up inside of us, then at some point they're going to explode. The lid's going to come off and
Yes.
it's not going to be pretty.
Absolutely. In the Bible, I love how the Bible gives us permission to be angry, but says, do not sin. Be angry, but do not sin. You
Right.
know, what we're feeling is real, and it's not something that, we should feel we have to push down. And like you said, it will come out in other ways. It may not come out in a big explosion, but it might come out in little, like, if you've ever been to Yellowstone, like those steam vents, like those little bursts of steam that come out, like those are those little resentful, bitter comments that might come out.
Yes.
And so it has to escape somehow, even if it's not like a total geyser.
Right. Yeah, I like that analogy. And actually, I haven't been to Yellowstone, but it is on my bucket list.
You need to go. It's so cool.
Yeah, oh my goodness, I've heard that. Well, it's interesting. We've had several ladies now who have tuned in. We've got somebody from Colorado, somebody from Peru with 3 hours kids. And then April shared, my husband has 4 kids. I have 3, and we are hoping to add a couple of hours kids. So, wow, I bet there are some feelings of overwhelm with schedules and, just the activities when you have that many kids. And I think
Yeah.
that's also what we're talking about for both of us. We have 5
Mhm.
kids. And so when you have just the activities of all of that, it can make a difference. And,
Yeah.
one thing for us, Heidi, that we found when kids move back and forth between homes was that it helped for the kids to have whatever they needed in one home, if at all possible, in both homes, I mean, so that they're
Mhm.
not moving everything all the
Yeah.
time. Now, certainly, there are certain things that need to move. I mean, maybe a band instrument or their cell phone or things that they carry every single day. But
Yeah.
we found that it seemed to help if they had some of their basic necessities in both homes. I'm
Yeah.
curious if y'all have discovered that also.
Yeah, and so in our situation, we only had joint custody the first year, and then
Okay.
then we were full-time. But I have coached women who that is a real concern. And here's the other thing too, because when you have, let's just say, sports equipment, and it's expensive. You can't have 2 sets of it, or a band
Right.
instrument like you mentioned. And so they do have to have some back and forth. And that is a lot for a kid to have to manage sometimes too, especially if they're very young. But the thing is that this is what I found when I coach stepmoms. It's the thought of, okay, the child forgot whatever. Now we have to either go pick it up from the other family's house, or they have to drop it off at our house. That can bring some stress and overwhelm because you're not necessarily planning on seeing the other household members from that household during this it's not like a planned drop off or pickup time. It's like during your peaceful time away from each other.
Yes.
Now suddenly that household is infiltrating your household. And so it's finding kind of that way of, how can we make this work? Like, with one stepmom I talked to, we talked about just having them drop the stuff off on the front step, so you didn't have to worry about answering the door and seeing that person, or having them walk in like, hello, anybody home? And like, no, don't come in. To
Right.
have that boundary of kind of protecting your safe space.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. And then also I want to talk a little bit about boundaries because I think that we can put some boundaries around our time, around our family time, around perhaps even what the kids are allowed to do. Now, certainly when there's 2 homes and there's another bio parent in another home that we are navigating, we have to take that into consideration and sometimes we get overruled, but I know for us, we were careful to not let the kids just do everything they wanted to. And
Yeah.
we even put some priority on things. We wanted them involved in a youth group. We really wanted our kids involved at
Yeah.
church. And so that was what the schedule started with. Now,
Mhm.
yes, there were other things. We had kids in music and cheerleading and but I think that it is helpful to let our kids know that we just can't do everything that we want to do. I remember in high school, they offer those kids so many things that
Yeah.
they could take part in, and you just can't. But for kids that are extroverts, they're going to migrate towards that. They may not want to
Mhm.
spend any time at home, and we, the parents, I think, have to help with that. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, it gets tough when you have two households who aren't able to come together and make that agreement. And so you've got one family signing up the kids for gymnastics practice and, swim team and all the things. And then
Hmm.
you've got the other household, maybe it's the family with the hours babies, and they're going, well, I don't want to have to put the kids in the car seat and put them in their seatbelts and be on the road on the go all the time.
Right.
And, I want to support my stepkid in their events. And I realize I'm speaking from a stepmom perspective,
Sure.
but it could be either way. And
Hmm.
so you have to, I think it's important to kind of come together. And I know that sometimes you don't have a lot of say in it, but you can, like you mentioned, Gayla, coming together with your husband and kind of creating family values and what do we think our family should revolve around, and
Hmm.
then what activities. So let's just say the other family, because I've had stepmoms that I've talked to who've dealt with this. Their stepkids are very involved, and that kind of draws them in. Or their husband is like, well, I want to go to all their basketball games because
Right.
I want to show my child that I'm invested in their life, and I'm not going to just
Right.
make them feel like my hours, kids with my new wife are my whole life is revolving around. And so then the stepmom is going, well, wait a minute, because I'm here with the little ones and you're off at these basketball games and I don't have any time with you. And so I think it really comes down to getting curious
Mm.
about the root issue. Like, is dad or whatever, the bio parent, wanting to be there for a specific reason? And what is that reason? Instead of just going, you're prioritizing this child over this, our family at home. Well, what's the reason for that? Are you feeling fearful that that child is going to think you're neglecting them? Are you feeling fearful that your ex-spouse is going to say, oh, look at that deadbeat parent of yours who can't show up to your there could be a real fear
Right.
that is driving them to be there. And then it's kind of going, okay, so I get that. That makes sense that you would feel that they might think that about you.
Hmm.
So let's go over here and go, what are our family values? What is God asking us to do? Is it a fear? Do we need to replace that with a truth from scripture? Is
Right.
it a competition thing? Maybe we need to let that competition go and submit that to the authority of Christ and let us only want to please God and not man. Is there, whatever the root issue is, where is that coming from? And like, how do we want to get together as a family here and protect this family too? Because we don't need to have a second divorce because
Oh,
that parent was off, kind of not investing in the current home.
right. Yeah. And so, what I hear you saying is we can help them process their
Yeah.
feelings when we are seeing something that maybe seems a little out of balance,
Yeah.
and we can bring that up with our partner and ask. I do think there's times that fear drives our behavior, and sometimes we don't
Yeah.
even recognize it, and it helps to just be able to ask them to talk about it. I want to remind our
Hmm.
viewers, throw up your questions if you have things. We want to help, um, as you deal perhaps with overwhelmed emotions, and trying to give some tips on that. Another thing I think, Heidi, especially for stepmoms in the beginning, that for me created some overwhelm was I tried to do everything for everybody, especially
Yeah.
as a stepmom. I was trying to really bond in these relationships, and I felt like I had to be super stepmom in order to make that happen. And it just really sent me over the edge. It had did
Yeah.
Just curious on, yeah, same thing with you?
Absolutely. And, I think probably, Gayla, the people watching are probably feeling that too because they're here wanting to learn and grow and
Mhm,
they're willing to be teachable. And if you
mhm.
have that kind of a teachable spirit, you're probably already a little bit of an overachiever and
That's a good point.
you want to do what's right and you have a deep desire to be a good part of that child's life. And whether it's a biological or stepchild. And I think you brought up a really good point that when we have this desire to be perfect or super stepmom, and, it's coming from an expectation that we either put on ourselves or we put on our family. or the people around us, or maybe I have an expectation of the other household, or I have an expectation that if I drive my stepkids around to all these events and all these practices, at the end of the day, they're going to say, I love you. They're going to say, thank you. And they're going to say, wow, look at you. You really invested in my life in a positive way. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when we don't hear those things, or we don't hear our spouse affirming us, or we certainly don't hear the other household affirming us,
Right.
we can start to get really bitter
Right.
and burned out. And so that's where I think we need to bring our expectations before God and
Right.
really get real. I mean, this is something, I mean, just being very candid, it's a pride thing in me to
Mm.
go, I want to do it all, and I want to do it all better than everybody else.
Right.
Not
And I
just
should
at
be able to.
yes.
I'm just gonna try harder, and I'll
Yeah.
do this.
And I'll stay up till 2 a.m. cleaning my house so that my stepkids can wake up to a perfectly clean house every day. Just not realistic. But that's
Right.
my pride coming through, and going, Lord, how can you strip that pride from me so I can be present and I can be investing in their lives, but I can be still, you know, keeping from burnout, keeping from the point where I'm only doing this so that I hear this, or I'm only going to help out here if you help me out here, or whatever,
Mm.
because that's
Yeah.
really just one upping each other. God just wants us to love others the way we would, that's just loving others is how we show love to Jesus. And so we can love Jesus and also take a step back and
Right.
love sometimes from a little bit of a distance, especially if, I mean, we don't want to hit burnout and to just give up completely. It's better to just say, hey, I'm kind of feeling like I can hardly breathe. My chest is tight. I'm feeling like I
Right.
don't know what to do with this. I need to step back a little bit. Where can I go with that so I can still help out around the house and help out with
Mhm.
my kids or stepkids, but not to for me, that was, I didn't do every pick up and drop off anymore. At first I thought I need to be in the car and like, hello, so glad you're back. And after a while it was like, no, stay home, hang out
Right.
with the hours babies, have some quality time with them, let my husband pick them up, they can decompress with him for a little while. And then when they get
Yes.
home,
Mm.
I'm happier. They've had that need met of just connecting with dad one-on-one or two-on-one. And I didn't have to get the kids in and out of the car seat. Now they're screaming, they're crying, and they're
Ugh.
hungry and whatever. So
Right.
setting some of those boundaries where I can go, I'm okay at home. And I'm
Mhm.
okay not being at every event if it means that when they walk in the door, I can say, hi, how'd it go? Versus, do you see what this did to me and the kids?
Right. Well, and Heidi, I look at scripture and see how Jesus modeled boundaries. I mean, in the New Testament, we often see him go away by himself to pray. He got away from the
Yeah.
crowds to spend time with his heavenly Father and maybe to re-energize himself before he went back to the crowd. I mean, we really
Yeah.
don't know specifically, but it does tell us that he left the crowd to go
Hmm.
and be by himself to pray. And
Yeah.
I think that we need to consider that ourselves. There are times we need to get alone. We need to make time for being alone with the Lord and reading scripture and drawing from that for our own lives. So
Yeah.
I always remember that. Look at how Jesus modeled boundaries and consider that in our own lives.
Absolutely. And it's okay to step away from the crowd and not have control,
Right,
because I think that's part of some of the reason why some of us want to be involved, is that we can then kind of manage the situation because we're present,
right.
and letting that go and saying, okay, God, this is my need for control. And I always tell stepmoms that I work with, it's not that we want to control everything. It's that we
Hmm.
don't want to feel out of control.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes not having any control, because we can't manage the things the way we would if it was just a nuclear home. We have to be, we have to pay attention to what the periphery is telling us to do or telling us where we have to be. And so sometimes that can just kind of well up inside of us, like, ugh, I don't have any
right,
control. So then we try to control every aspect. And
right.
that's just something I would just say, 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, take every thought captive and make it
Hmm.
obedient to Christ. And sometimes I have to literally picture like the thought that's in my head, grabbing it and throwing it in front of the cross. Like,
Oh,
this is a thought that is going to be obedient to Jesus.
right. Yeah, that's good. I like that visual to think about that. We've had a question come in, so I'm going to answer this. We're going to go through this and then we're going to move on and talk about having an hours day because I know there's some who want to hear about that. But the question is, how do you navigate building a relationship with a stepchild? The spouse feels like I'm distant from the child, but that's not the case. I prefer not to impose so much since the bio mom is still involved. So how do you still
Mm,
navigate that? When
yeah.
there's a bio mom involved, sounds like what she's saying.
Well, I would first commend this stepmom. It's a stepmom, right? Asking this
Right.
question. I would
Mhm.
first commend whoever wrote that question. I would commend you for being so sensitive to the situation. That
Right.
is actually pretty amazing.
Mhm.
I think that it's okay to recognize that there is a mom in the picture that that child is very connected with, but also I'd get curious about where this husband is feeling like there isn't a connection, because sometimes we have blind spots and we
Mhm.
don't see, like, so and so might think, oh, well, I did this for them and that shows love. Well, maybe that wasn't quite the way that child received love. Or, you can go into the
Mhm.
five love languages and look at Ron's book, and how he deals with that with step families. And you can talk about, how does a child feel loved? So if you said, hey, I like your shirt, but really the kid wanted some quality time, maybe that child isn't feeling that connection. And maybe the bio parent, the dad in this case, is seeing things in his child because he knows his child. He's seeing things that maybe those needs aren't getting met from the step parent, even though she's trying so hard to invest and be sensitive to that situation. So I might just say, hey, husband, I'm curious why you would think that. I want to be willing to, hear what you have to say. You know this child better than me. I
Mhm.
do want you to know I'm trying in my own way to love this child and accept this child and pour into this child. But if I'm missing anything, I'm open to hearing that.
That's good. I love that because we are trying to get input from them. And I think it's okay though to say, I don't want to be too pushy. And
Yeah,
especially we don't know what the age of this child is, but if it's a teenager and somebody who's heavily invested in the relationship with their mom, it's going to take longer. And dad
absolutely.
might need to understand that. Sometimes stepmoms have some knowledge of what it takes to really bond with a child and that tight bond that happens, especially with daughters and their biological moms. And so sometimes that conversation might need to happen also. And for dad to understand, well, sometimes it takes longer for relationships to form with stepkids than we want. But I think just to reassure them, I do want a relationship with your child
Hmm.
and I am moving towards that. Sometimes that can help also just to
Yeah.
reassure the bio dad that you are working and want to have a relationship and get input, be curious, like you said too, Heidi. I think that's helpful. Well, let's talk about having an hours child. You and I both, I just have one, you have three. But I think one of the things I want to talk about for one is how do you determine if it's right for your family? I mean, there's never going to be a perfect time. I will say that research shows that how healthy the family is can make a difference. So if the
Yeah.
family relationships are already in a good place and moving toward familyness and you're considering an Irish child, then that actually is will help that trajectory oftentimes. But if the family really isn't in a good place and maybe you're even thinking, oh, an Irish child is going to pull this family together, not necessarily. In fact, an hours
Hmm.
child could move the family down the road of discord if that's already happening. So I think it's
Yeah.
helpful to know the place your family is at before you begin to have an hours child, before you really think about that. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't give it time. I will say for our experience, my husband and I both came in with two kids. And so we went from 2 to 4 overnight. We both had custody of them. And it just felt really chaotic in our home.
Mm.
And we had the conversation ahead of time, though, that we wanted a child together, but we didn't feel that it should happen right in the beginning. So, one, I think what we want to say is, and I know you have said this before too, Heidi, that it's important that you have this conversation before marriage, if at all possible, because if you get married and then you're not on the same page with this, it's going to be a whole lot harder. But that is one thing that I would say. But also just prayer can really make a difference. I mean, for us, we knew that we needed to give it some time, and we did. We waited 6 years before we had a child
Mhm.
together, even though my biological clock was ticking, and I knew that. I was almost 40 when we had the ours child. But at the same time, we didn't think it was wise at that point because there was so much going on with our biological kids. So
Yeah.
all of that can come into play. Now, my story is a little different than yours. So tell us about your situation with your ours kids.
Yeah, that's perfect advice, and I think that's so wise to just have all those conversations and to kind of just go at God's pace and not
Hmm.
our own. I mean, we have desires, but
Right,
then it's like, let's take those desires before God and just make sure they're lined up because a baby at any time is a gift. It doesn't matter when or where. A baby is a gift from God.
right,
But there are times where it could maybe add a little bit more stress and chaos. And so, like you said, having that healthy environment, at least somewhat healthy, or at least
right.
kind of moving in a healthy direction. But I tell you what, in my situation, of course, I didn't have children when we got married. I had never been married. So I walked in, became, an instant stepmom and stepmom to these two kids. And, but I had always had a very, very strong desire to have my own
Mhm.
children. And so that was a conversation. I had two deal breaker conversations with my husband, a deal breaker conversation with 2 points. And that was that I wanted him to be a Christian and I wanted to know if he wanted more kids. Because if he didn't, if he was content with his two, I would have said, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. We've developed some very strong feelings for you, but I need to cut it off right now because this is such a deep desire in my heart. And I don't know if I could love you and not feel resentment later on, if I didn't have this desire met. Now granted, God is always in control. Sometimes even if you have a desire, it doesn't work out, but I
Right.
didn't want my own decision to be a part of that. And so when we got married, we were it took a little bit of finagling to get everybody kind of on that, like, okay, this is our new life together as a family, but we kind of were moving in that direction with my stepdaughter especially. But when we did announce that we were pregnant with number one, that almost that security and bond that we had just created together, that stepmom and stepdaughter relationship, was very much now it became very fragile. She
Hmm.
was almost, it was like a bus hit her and she was like, wait a minute, I just opened my heart to this new woman. I just started to feel comfortable with her and I started to develop like trust with her. And now she's coming in and telling me that safety is now going to be shattered. Like, I don't
Hmm.
have anything to fault. Now my dad is going to have a new child to prioritize. He's going to have a child with this new woman that bonds them in a way that I'm going to be an outsider. And so I could see that initially. And then the second thing is, then we found out it was going to be a girl. And then it was like, just when she was starting to get used to the idea of a baby, then we were like, and it's a girl. And she's like, no, like competition,
So,
and so
okay. So you think it would have been easier if it had been a boy? Yeah.
I think for number 1, we did
Yes.
have 2 boys after that, but, I mean, it was all just a process of
Right.
getting everybody kind of on board at their own pace, and
Right.
so for me, that looked like, okay, I am experiencing such joy because I've always wanted a child, and I've finally, like, I'm pregnant, and I'm excited, I'm married, I have this life that I've wanted for so long. But I've got 2 kids over here who are very skeptical
Hmm.
and they're not sharing in my joy. And so my husband too, we were both kind of caught in this place of we wanted to be joyful, but we didn't want to be too joyful in front of them and rub it in. And so for me, that looked like finding my own place for joy. I had, found it with my friends and my family. I could talk about it openly in front of them, or I'd go out and look for baby clothes and have those joyful, motherhood moments where I could
Hmm.
just enjoy and embrace motherhood. But I
Hmm.
didn't necessarily talk about it a whole lot in front of them unless they were ready, or we'd ask questions that would give them an opportunity to share how they were feeling. But it wasn't like, oh, look at this new shirt I got for the baby. And like, oh, great. I wanted to be sensitive to their place. And then eventually, as we got closer to the baby being born, we got each of my stepkids a gift, like a baby gift for them to have
Oh,
something for their bedrooms. Like, what
yeah.
would you like to pick out at the store? This is a gift from your new little sibling. And then they started to slowly get on board, but it was kind of going at their pace.
Right. And did you anticipate in the beginning that they would react that way? Did you feel like you knew that would happen? Or even take us back to when you told them that you were pregnant. How did that go?
Yeah, I think I write this in my ebook, but we thought, oh, this would be special, like a special experience to share the news that we're going to have a baby, they're going to have a new sibling. And so my husband and I decided to take them to a coffee shop and get them a hot chocolate and a muffin or something. And then like, guess what? We have news. And they loved their coffee shop experience, but up until that point, because as soon as we shared the news, they both burst out into tears. And
Oh
yeah. And then they were like, "Why did you take us out in public? We're embarrassed. What if our friends from school walk in and see us?" So, it was not the right thing to do it in public. Of course, we forgot. We moved to a different town, and then when we got pregnant with number 2, we forgot, and we did it. We did the same thing again in a different coffee shop. Completely forgot. So by number 3, we were finally getting smart, and my husband told his son, my stepson, and I told my stepdaughter very, very casually, privately at home, and that we had figured it out. Like, it's not always our joy and excitement does not
Mhm.
always mean it's theirs. And I know for a lot of stepmoms and bio moms, it is like they're at, in a step family, there can be a lot of joy from the younger
Mhm.
children or the other children involved, the older children sometimes. But anyway, for us, it wasn't that way. And I had to I had to come to God and say, what I have to have joy. I cannot let these people steal my joy. I can't let
Right,
these kids steal my joy or their mom steal my joy or anybody steal my joy. It's
right.
not it's not up for grabs. My joy belongs to me. I'm going to celebrate and I'm going to have special moments, but I'm going to have to do it in a way that's still sensitive to them.
Yeah, I think that is really good. And it might mean that you have to go to different people, to maybe
Yeah.
your friends, or because it seems like nowadays it's such a big deal when people are having a baby. You got to have a gender reveal party. I mean, we didn't do all this stuff way back when I had babies, but
Mhm.
now, and so it would be hard to think that you're going to do that when you have two stepchildren who seem to not really be taking this news well. And so I guess what we're saying is we do have to take their feelings. We have to take that into effect and realize that that might curb some of what we do, but at the same time, you don't want them to steal your joy. And
Yeah.
so you're navigating this delicate situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember we talked beforehand briefly about where does some of that overwhelm come in when the stepkids and the ours children are all in the same home.
Mhm.
And sometimes again, it comes back to the expectations. For my stepdaughter, she started to see that our children that were living under our roof, that had both mom and dad in the household, she started to sometimes see that as a threat. And I don't think she would ever vocalize that,
Hmm.
nor would she allow herself to go there. But I think that was a threat to her and her safety and her position in our family. And even the fact that they got to have two parents that loved each other. And
Right.
so I tried to draw her out when she would, she'd come home from school and I would be playing in the living room with the little ones or whatever. She'd go and shut herself in her room. And I would just make sure I'd go to the door and just say, "Hey, would you like to join us in the living room? I'd love to hear about your day." And sometimes she was doing her own thing, but sometimes she would come out. And I think sometimes just drawing her out and reminding her, you are still a valuable part of this family.
Right.
Even if I have to go change a diaper or I've got a screaming child, I promise I'll be right back. I want to hear the rest
Right.
of your story. You matter to me, but I do need to take care of this issue, but I'm here for you. And sometimes just balancing that and communicating not only our needs, but our heart for our
Right.
child or for our
Mhm.
family can help everybody kind of go, okay, this isn't so bad.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that you're demonstrating you do want her to be a part of the life with the ours child also, and in
Yeah.
a way that hopefully she can relate to. And so you are trying to draw her in and not just allowing her, especially as kids get older, man, they like to go to their bedroom and just be walled up in there. And to have an hours child to them gives them a really good reason, I don't want to be part of this. And so it's even more likely that that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But you were being very intentional in really drawing them out and helping them be part of this family. And I think that's the thing we want to talk about is just because it starts off in a way that doesn't quite go as you wanted. I mean, for both
Mhm.
kids to burst into tears at the coffee shop, wow, that would kind of set you back about, oh my gosh, have I made a bad decision here? Should we not be
Yeah.
doing that? That's not the case. It's just that we've got to navigate the situation with these kids. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how things are now. Like, what are the relationships like with the stepchildren and the ours children?
Absolutely. And real quick, just because I didn't mention it before, but I think this is also kind of important about my stepson,
Yeah.
is that as he became a teenager and, we announced baby number 3 when he was 15, his mind automatically goes to, okay, and I think a lot of kids think this way, but okay, more kids equals more money. That equals less money for me to get the things I want. And
Right.
so some of that we had to talk through with him. And coming back to the 5 love languages, turns out he was a gift giver and receiver. And so for him, things were very important. It seemed greedy at the time. It seemed like, why are you so wanting these special Nike socks? Or like, can't you just wear the regular socks? Whatever. For him, things were so important. So we could just kind of talk through, what is the value of people? What is the value of things? And but also recognize, like, that's the part of how he sees love. Like if
Mm,
there's not enough money around to get him the gift he wants, he doesn't feel as loved. Okay, let's explore that. Do gifts equal love? Sometimes. But so now jumping forward, again, I mentioned they're 26 and 23,
right.
and we live separately, but I would say we're very connected, especially now, my stepson, the gift giver and receiver, he is the most generous gift giver. I mean, all those years of him being kind of greedy and selfish and like, oh, there's not enough money for me to get my stuff. He gives the most generous, thoughtful gifts, even to the
Wow.
younger children.
Hmm.
And even, just thoughtful gifts like walkie-talkies or like, fun activity stuff. And sometimes dangerous gifts like, here's a rappelling kit you can hang from the tree in the backyard. And he's
Oh no.
7 years old. Like, can we wait a few years on but his heart is to like help them have a fun childhood, and I love that. I love that about him. And my stepdaughter too, she's playing, like, she and her husband get on and play Mario Kart with our younger boys, and just that
Yeah.
little connection every once in a while of
Right.
getting on, it makes me feel special that they are investing. But I mean, it hasn't always been easy. And I think, again, coming back to that overwhelm, coming back to that, what are our expectations? And I love how you mentioned that about the husband's expectations. Sometimes our husbands just get on the
Hmm.
same bandwagon as us. Like, we have to be super dad, a super mom. We have to do everything right. What does it look like? I mean, I love the crock pot illustration that Ron Deal has. And what does it look like? Maybe we need to re-examine our expectations. In this
Right.
season, maybe it's
Hmm.
not going to look like we want it to look. But let's cast some vision for the future. We
Right.
eventually want to see relationships be strengthened. We do want to see relationships be we can repair if there's damage. So how can that look right now? And how can
Hmm.
I treat that person with a mindset of, what is the relationship I want with them in 10 or 15 years? How am I going to react to this situation? Is it worth making it a big deal? Or could I just kind of go, hey, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm just going to let it go. With my stepkids, like, or they, even my stepson wouldn't call our third little ours baby by his name for the first year.
Oh
He would say the baby's crying. And I chose to not take that
no.
personally.
Yeah.
I had to go to God and say, fill that need in me so that I don't have to project that onto my stepson. And so I would just smile and, okay, thanks for letting me know. And by the first year, I tell you what, when that little chubby baby started to reach up for his big brother, there was such a bond. But if I had
Right.
taken it personally and berated my stepson, like, why can't you treat him like a person or whatever,
Right.
he may not have felt safe to have that bond later.
Exactly. And it's the same thing that we talk about with step siblings. It may not start out well, but we can always pray for God's redemption in these relationships. We can always keep pouring into them. We can always keep thinking long term. That is the message that we need to have in our head is, okay, this isn't like I want it today, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to quit. It doesn't mean that's the way it's always going to be, because I've seen so many relationships in step families that completely turn around in time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes longer than we want. But as we continue to really invest and continue to think about long term, it can make such a difference. And it's the same thing in our family. So
Yeah.
ours child is now 23, the son that my husband and I had together, and he just married 2 months ago, and he had all of his brothers and sisters in the wedding, all of
Oh,
them. And it was just really beautiful to see how these relationships have grown
yeah.
and come together. And I'm just thankful for that. So for
Mhm.
those who might be wondering and trying to create the perfect setting before they have an ours child, that'll never happen. You'll never have
Yeah.
that perfect setting. And so I would say it's really praying about it and asking God for wisdom in regards to, is this the right thing? When do we do it? And I do believe that God will give you answers to that, and God will bless you for wanting to ask for his wisdom about that. Now, Heidi,
Absolutely.
I want to mention you have an ebook on your website about adding an hours baby. So I want to make sure that our listeners know that. And also, you've done a podcast with Ron, and y'all specifically talked about having an hours baby. So we're going to put up information about that so that our viewers can also know how they can locate that information. I'm so thankful that you joined us. We really appreciate your perspective. And where can ladies find you if they want to?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gayla. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. You can find me at notjustastepmom.com. And on there, there's a link to my coaching, which I do for individuals or couples.
Great.
And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram under Not Just a Stepmom.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So enjoyed visiting with you,
Thank you,
Heidi.
Thank you so much, Gayla.
Ladies, make plans to join us next month for our October live stream on October the 8th. Don't forget our new time at 12 o'clock Central for the live stream. I'm going to have Shannon Simmons joining me. Shannon's a mom and a stepmom to 5 children, and she and her husband Roosevelt have been married 24 years. And we are going to be talking about how to encourage and support our men. So make plans to join me for that. Also, we're getting close to our summit on step family ministry that's going to take place October 10th and 11th in Dallas. This event is geared towards equipping the church to minister to blended families. We bring together the leading voices in the field of step family ministry, and you can find all the details of that at summitonstepfamilies.com. Rondell and I will both be there as speakers, and we would love to meet you there. So be sure that you're following the Family Life Blended on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Have your notifications turned on so that you know when we go live. I love to have live visitors every month, and then we also have the recording when you can't watch it live. And I want to close by saying, oftentimes as moms and stepmoms and blended families, we are called to do hard things that can result in having overwhelmed emotions during busy seasons. And one of my favorite passages that I often go to is 2 Corinthians 12:9 through 10, where the Apostle Paul is discouraged with a hard situation that he's in, and doesn't feel that God has answered his prayer the way that he wanted. But Jesus says to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." We have access to God's power. We have access to lean in and ask for his help in our situation. And so I encourage you to invite God in to your hard issue. Keep pressing on, ladies, and I'll see you next time.